The cold metal floor pressed against Jake Morrison's face as he slowly opened his eyes. His head felt like someone had used it as a hammer target. The last thing he remembered was the flash of energy weapons and the screams of his team members. Now he was somewhere else entirely. Jake pushed himself up and looked around. He was in a small room with gray walls that seemed to be made of some kind of smooth stone. There was no window, just a heavy door with bars across a small opening. The air smelled strange, like metal and something he could not identify. "So the human wakes up," a deep voice said from outside the door. Jake got to his feet and moved toward the bars. Through the opening, he could see a tall figure standing guard. The creature was at least 7 feet tall and covered in silver scales that caught the light from the ceiling. Its eyes were bright amber and seemed to glow in the dim light. "Where am I?" Jake asked, his voice rough from thirst. "You are on Kethvar, human. You are a prisoner of the Kethvari Empire." Jake's heart sank. He had heard stories about the Kethvari. They were known across the galaxy as fierce warriors who conquered planet after planet. Their military was brutal and efficient. No one who was captured by them ever came back. "What happened to my team?" Jake asked. The guard did not answer. Instead, it walked away, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. Hours passed, or maybe days. Jake had no way to tell time in the windowless cell. He tried to stay calm and think about his situation. He had been part of a diplomatic mission to make contact with the Kethvari. Earth's government wanted to avoid conflict and had hoped to negotiate some kind of peace treaty. That plan had failed badly. The sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Jake heard voices speaking in a language he did not understand. The footsteps stopped outside his cell. "Open it," commanded a new voice. This one was different from the guard. It was still deep and powerful, but somehow more controlled. The door opened with a loud clang. Jake stepped back as 3 figures entered his cell. 2 were guards similar to the one he had seen before. The third was clearly their leader. This Kethvari was different from the others. She was tall like the rest, but her silver scales seemed to shine brighter. Her amber eyes were sharp and intelligent. She wore what looked like military armor, but it was decorated with symbols that Jake did not recognize. "I am Commander Zareth," she said in perfect English. "You are Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Horizon." "How do you know who I am?" Jake asked. "We have been watching your species for some time. We know about your ships, your weapons, your government. We know you came here to talk about peace." Jake tried to read her expression, but the alien features made it difficult. "Then you know I came here to avoid a war." "War is what my people do best, Captain Morrison. It is what we have always done. We conquer worlds and add them to our empire. Your Earth will be next." "It doesn't have to be that way," Jake said. "There are other options." Zareth studied him for a long moment. "Other options? What other options does a weak species like yours have against the might of the Kethvari?" Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting angry would not help his situation. "Maybe we're not as weak as you think. Your diplomatic team was destroyed in minutes. Your weapons barely scratched our ships. Your soldiers ran when they saw us coming. How is that not weak?" "Because strength isn't just about weapons and fighting," Jake replied. "There are different kinds of strength." Zareth laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "Tell me, human, what other kinds of strength are there?" Jake thought carefully before answering. "The strength to build instead of destroy. The strength to create instead of conquer. The strength to find solutions that help everyone instead of just yourself." "Pretty words," Zareth said, "but words do not win wars. Maybe the goal shouldn't be to win wars. Maybe the goal should be to avoid them." The 2 guards behind Zareth made sounds that might have been laughter. One of them said something in their language that made the other one laugh harder. "My soldiers think you are foolish," Zareth explained. "They think all humans are foolish. Weak creatures who talk about peace while preparing for war. Are we preparing for war?" Jake asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like we sent diplomats to try to prevent one." Zareth's expression changed slightly. Jake could not tell if it was surprise or something else. You really came here believing you could negotiate with US? We believed there might be a way for both our species to coexist without fighting. And now? Jake looked around the cell, then back at Zareth. Now I'm starting to think maybe we were wrong about some things, but not about everything. What do you mean? I mean that maybe not all Kethvari are the same. Maybe some of you are different from what we expected. Zareth became very still. The guards stopped laughing. The room fell silent except for the sound of the ventilation system. Different how? Zareth asked quietly. Jake chose his words carefully. You speak our language perfectly. You took the time to learn about us before we even arrived. You're asking questions instead of just killing me. That suggests you think differently than what we were told about your people. What were you told? About us? That you were mindless killers who destroyed everything in your path. That you never showed mercy or consideration for other species. That you were incapable of seeing any viewpoint except your own. Zareth was quiet for a long time. Her amber eyes seemed to be looking at something far away. And what do you think now? She asked finally. Jake took a deep breath. I think maybe we were wrong about some of you. I think maybe some Kethvari are capable of more than just fighting and conquering. I think maybe you're different from what we expected. The words hung in the air between them. Jake could see that his comment had affected her somehow, but he was not sure how. Different, Zareth repeated slowly, as if she was testing the word. Yes, different from the others. Different from what we were told to expect. Zareth stared at him for what felt like a very long time. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in the silence. Finally, she spoke. You think I am different from my people? I think you're different from what I expected any of your people to be like. Different enough to matter? Jake nodded. Different enough to matter. Zareth stepped closer to the bars. Her amber eyes locked onto his. Then let's marry. Jake's mouth fell open. He stared at her, certain he had misunderstood. What? You heard me correctly, Captain Morrison. If you truly believe I am different, then let's marry. The two guards behind her suddenly stopped laughing. They looked at each other with what Jake could only describe as shock. I don't understand, Jake sighed. Among my people, marriage is not just about personal feelings. It is about recognizing an equal. It is about forming an alliance between those who respect each other. If you truly see me as different, if you truly believe I am not like the others, then prove it. Jake felt like the world was spinning around him. You're serious. I am always serious, Captain Morrison. The question is whether you are serious about what you just said. Jake looked at her face, trying to understand what was happening. This was not how he had imagined this conversation would go. This was not how he had imagined any of this would go. I need to think about this, he said. Of course you do. You have until tomorrow to give me your answer. But understand this, human. If you accept, there will be trials. There will be challenges. Some of my people will try to kill you. Others will try to prove you are not worthy. Are you prepared for that? Jake swallowed hard. And if I refuse? Then you will be executed as an enemy of the Empire. Your death will be broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to other species who might consider opposing us. Those are my only choices? Those are your only choices. Zareth turned and walked toward the door. The guards followed her. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at him. Think carefully, Captain Morrison. You said I was different. Tomorrow we will see if you are different as well. The door closed with a clang, leaving Jake alone with the most important decision of his life. Jake spent the night sitting on the cold floor of his cell, staring at the wall and thinking about Zareth's offer. Marriage to an alien warrior woman who could probably crush him with one hand. It sounded like madness, but the alternative was death. He tried to understand what marriage meant to the Kethvari. From what Zareth had said, it was not just about love or companionship. It was about respect and alliance. But what did that really mean? And why would she want to marry him? The morning came too soon. Jake heard footsteps in the corridor outside his cell. The door opened and two guards entered, followed by Zareth. She looked exactly the same as before, but somehow Jake felt like everything had changed. Have you made your decision, Captain Morrison? she asked. Jake stood up slowly. His legs felt stiff from sitting on the floor all night. I have questions first. Ask them, why marriage? Why not just keep me as a prisoner? Why not just kill me? Zareth crossed her arms. Because marriage would make you my equal in Kethvari. Law, as my husband, you would have rights and protections. You would be able to speak for yourself and your people. You would have a voice in decisions that affect both our species. And what would you get out of it? I would get a partner who sees the world differently than I do, someone who can help me find new solutions to old problems. Someone who can help me change my people's path. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You want to change your people? I want to save them from themselves? We have been warriors for so long that we have forgotten how to be anything else. We conquer worlds, but we do not know how to build civilizations. We win battles, but we are losing the war against our own nature. What do you mean? Look around you, Captain Morrison. This ship, this empire, everything you see was built by conquered peoples. We take their knowledge and their skills, but we do not create anything new ourselves. We are parasites feeding on the creativity of others. Jake was surprised by her honesty. And you think humans can help change that? I think humans might be the key to helping us remember who we used to be before we became obsessed with war. Before Jake could respond, the door burst open. A massive Kethvari warrior stormed into the cell. This one was bigger than the others, with darker scales and scars across his face. He was clearly angry. Commander Zareth, he roared. What is this madness I hear about you marrying a human? Zareth H. turned to face him calmly. General Thokmar, I was not aware that my personal affairs were any of your business. Your personal affairs become my business when they threaten the security of the Empire. You cannot seriously be considering this insanity. I am considering it very seriously. Thokmar looked at Jake with disgust. This pathetic creature? This weak little human? You would lower yourself to marry this thing? I would marry someone who has shown me more wisdom in one conversation than you have shown in years of service. Zareth replied. Thokmar's face darkened. You forget yourself, Commander. You forget your place? My place is to serve the Empire. And I believe this marriage could serve the Empire better than another pointless war. The Empire was built on war. War is what makes us strong. War is what is making us weak, Zareth said firmly. We spend all our resources on weapons and soldiers. We destroy planets instead of learning from them. We create enemies instead of allies? How is that strength? Thokmar stepped closer to her. You sound like a traitor, Commander. I sound like someone who cares more about the future of our people than about following old traditions that no longer serve us. And what makes you think this human can help us? What makes you think any human is worth our attention? Jake decided to speak up. Maybe because we've survived this long without conquering anyone. Both Kethvari turned to look at him. Thokmar's expression was murderous. You survived because you were lucky? Thokmar said. You survived because you were too weak to be worth conquering until now. Or maybe we survived because we learned to work together instead of fighting each other, Jake replied. Maybe we survived because we learned to solve problems without violence. Problems are solved with strength. Some problems are, but not all problems. And not the problems that really matter. Thokmar moved toward Jake, but Zareth stepped between them. Enough, General. You will leave my prisoner alone. Your prisoner? Or your future husband? Both. Thokmar stared at her for a long moment. Jake could see the anger in his amber eyes. This will not stand, Commander. The Council will hear about this. They will not allow such a disgrace to our people. The Council will hear what I choose to tell them, and they will respect my right to choose my own husband. We will see about that. Thokmar turned and stormed out of the cell. The guards followed him, leaving Jake alone with Zareth. Friend of yours? Jake asked. General Thokmar represents the old ways. He believes that strength comes only from conquest and domination. He sees any change as weakness. And he'll try. To stop the marriage? He will try. But he cannot stop it if you accept and if you prove yourself worthy. Prove myself worthy how? There are trials, Captain Morrison. 3 trials that any potential husband must pass. The trial of strength, the trial of wisdom, and the trial of honor. Jake felt his stomach drop. What kind of trials? The trial of strength requires you to face a HFY warrior in single combat. The trial of wisdom requires you to solve a problem that has challenged our greatest minds. The trial of honor requires you to make a choice that reveals your true character. And if I fail any of these trials, then you die. Jake sat down heavily on the floor. This keeps getting better and better. I will not lie to you, Captain Morrison. The trials are dangerous. Many HFY have died attempting them. But they are also fair. They test what truly matters in a potential mate. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I can't fight a HFY warrior? Strength is not just about physical power. It is about using whatever advantages you have in the best way possible. Humans may be physically weaker than HFY, but you are clever. You think differently. That might be enough. Might be. It is the only chance you have, the only chance we have? Jake looked up at her. Why is this so important to you? Why risk everything for a human you barely know? Zaret H was quiet for a moment. Because I have seen what endless war does to a people. I have watched us become something we were never meant to be. I have seen too many worlds burn and too many lives wasted. I want my people to have a future that is more than just conquest and destruction. And you think I can help with that? I think you represent a different way of thinking. A way that values creation over destruction, cooperation over domination, wisdom over brute force. I think that is what my people need to learn if they are going to survive. Jake stood up and walked to the bars of his cell. What about your people? What will they think about you marrying a human? Some will support me. Others will try to kill us both. But change is never easy, Captain Morrison. It always requires someone to take the first step. And I would be that first step? We would be that first step. Together. Jake turned back to face her. If I agree to this, if I accept your proposal, what happens then? Then you become my betrothed. You will be moved to better quarters. You will be fed and clothed as befits your new status. And you will begin preparing for the trials. When do the trials start? As soon as the council approves the marriage. That should be within a few days. And if the council refuses to approve it? Then General Thokmar will have you executed as an enemy of the state. Jake laughed bitterly. So, my choices are really death now or death later. Your choices are death with certainty or life with possibility. The trials are dangerous, but they are not impossible. And if you succeed, you will not only save your own life, but you might help save both our species from a war that will benefit. No one. Jake thought about his crew on the horizon. He thought about Earth and all the people who were counting on him to find a peaceful solution. He thought about the alternative to marriage, which was certain death. All right, he said finally, I accept your proposal. I will marry you, Commander Zareth. For the first time since he had met her, Zareth smiled. It was a strange sight on her alien features, but somehow it made her seem more human. Then let us begin, she said. 3 days later, Jake found himself standing in a large circular arena surrounded by hundreds of HFY warriors. The ceiling was high above, and bright lights shone down on the sandy floor. The noise from the crowd was deafening. Some were cheering, but most were making sounds that Jake assumed were either laughing or booing. His new quarters had been much better than the cell. He had been given clean clothes, good food, and even access to information about HFY culture. But none of that helped him now as he faced his first trial. Citizens of the Empire, announced a voice that echoed through the arena. Today we witness the trial of strength. The human Jake Morrison seeks to prove himself worthy of marriage to Commander Zareth. He will face warrior Groktile in single combat. Jake looked across the arena at his opponent. Groktile was enormous, even by HFY standards. He was at least 8 feet tall and covered in dark green scales. His muscles bulged under his armor, and his claws looked sharp enough to cut through steel. The rules are simple, the announcer continued. The combat ends when one fighter yields, is knocked unconscious, or dies. The human may use any tactics he chooses. Begin, Groktal charged immediately. He moved faster than Jake had expected, covering the distance between them in seconds. Jake barely rolled to the side in time to avoid the massive claws that would have torn him apart. The crowd roared as Groktal spun around and charged again. This time Jake was ready. Instead of dodging, he dropped low and swept his leg behind Groktal's knee. The big warrior stumbled but did not fall. Jake scrambled away, his mind racing. He could not win this fight with strength. Groktal was too big, too strong, too fast. He needed to be smarter. Groktal came at him again, this time more carefully. Jake noticed that the warrior was favoring his left side slightly. Maybe an old injury? Jake filed that information away. For the next several minutes, Jake dodged and weaved, always staying just out of reach. He could hear the crowd getting restless. They wanted to see blood, not a human run the arena, but Jake was learning. He was watching Groktal's movements, looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything he could use. And slowly, he began to see opportunities. The next time Groktal charged, Jake did something unexpected. Instead of dodging to the side, he dropped to his knees and slid forward, right between the warrior's legs. As he passed underneath, he struck hard at the back of Groktal's left knee. Groktal howled in pain and stumbled. Jake rolled away and got back to his feet. "Fight like a warrior," Groktal roared. "Stop running and face me." "I am facing you," Jake replied. "I'm just not stupid enough to try to outmuscle you." This seemed to make Groktal even angrier. He charged again, but this time Jake was ready with a different strategy. He grabbed a handful of sand from the arena floor and threw it directly into Groktal's eyes. The warrior clawed at his face, temporarily blinded. Jake took advantage of the moment to strike at the same injured knee, this time with all his strength. There was a sickening crack, and Groktal went down hard. The crowd fell silent. Jake stood over the fallen warrior, breathing hard. "Do you yield?" Jake asked. Groktal looked up at him with a mixture of pain and respect. "I yield, human." "You fight with honor, even if you fight strangely?" The crowd erupted in mixed reactions. Some cheered, others seemed angry. Jake looked up at the viewing platform where Zareth sat with the council members. She was smiling. "The trial of strength is complete," announced the voice. "Jake Morrison has proven himself worthy. The trial of wisdom will begin in 1 hour." Jake was led to a smaller room where he could rest and drink water. Ziaratich came to see him. "That was well done," she said. "You fought like a human, not like a Kethvari. That is exactly what I hoped to see." "I got lucky," Jake said. "No, you were smart. You used your advantages and found his weaknesses." "That is not luck. That is intelligence. What's the next trial like?" "The trial of wisdom is different. You will be presented with a strategic problem that has puzzled our military leaders for generations. You must find a solution that has escaped our greatest minds." Jake felt nervous. "What kind of problem?" "You will see, but remember, you do not need to think like a Kethvari. You need to think like a human." An hour later, Jake found himself in a room with a large table. On the table was a detailed map of a star system with several planets. Standing around the table were a dozen Kethvari military officers, including General Thokmar. "The problem is simple," Thokmar said with a sneer. "This system has been under siege for 5 years. The defenders have fortified 3 planets and placed weapon platforms throughout the system. Every attack we have tried has failed. Our losses have been enormous." "How would you capture this system?" Jake studied the map carefully. "The defensive." Positions were indeed impressive. The planets were connected by overlapping fields of fire from the weapon platforms. Any attacking force would be cut to pieces trying to reach the planets. "What resources do I have available?" Jake asked. "The same resources our commanders have had. A fleet of warships, ground forces, and siege equipment." Jake continued to study the map. The more he looked at it, the more he realized that the Kethvari had been thinking about this problem in the wrong way. "You've been trying to fight your way through the defenses," Jake said finally. "Of course, that is how you capture a fortified position. But what if you don't need to capture the position? What if you can make the defenders abandon it? Thokmar frowned. Explain. The defenders are spread across 3 planets. That means they need supplies, communication between the planets, and regular reinforcement. What if you cut off those? Supply lines? The supply lines are heavily defended. Not all of them. Look at this. Jake pointed to the map. The defenders get their food and water from these mining colonies outside the system. The colonies are not heavily defended because they're far from the main battle. Even if we captured the colonies, the defenders could hold out for months. Not if you don't just capture the colonies. What if you offered the colonists a better deal? What if you convinced them to join you willingly instead of forcing them? The room fell silent. Jake could see the officers looking at each other with confusion. You want us to negotiate with miners? Thokmar asked incredulously. You to give them a reason to support you instead of the defenders. Better pay, better working conditions, protection for their families. Make them want to be on your side. That is not how we do things. That's exactly the problem. You're thinking like conquerors, not like strategists. If the colonists stop sending supplies to the defenders will have to surrender or starve. No battle needed. Jake continued studying the map. And here's another thing. The defenders are communicating through these relay stations. They're using them to coordinate their defenses. What if you didn't destroy the relay stations, but instead captured them and used them to send false information? False information? Make the defenders think you're attacking from the wrong direction. Make them move their forces to defend against an attack that isn't coming. Then, when they're out of position, you can take the real objectives without a fight. General Thokmar stared at the map. This is not warfare. This is trickery. This is warfare, Jake replied. It's just not the kind of warfare you're used to. The goal is to win, not to prove how tough you are. One of the other officers spoke. The human may be right. We have been so focused on showing our strength that we forgot the point is to achieve victory. Victory through deception is not honorable, Thokmar said. Victory through intelligence is not dishonorable, Jake replied. It's just different. The officers talked among themselves for several minutes. Finally, one of them announced, "The Council finds this solution acceptable. The trial of wisdom is complete." Jake felt relief wash over him. 2 trials down, 1 to go. The final trial will take place tomorrow, Thokmar said. The trial of honor. This will determine whether you truly have the character to be worthy of Commander Zareth. What does the trial of honor involve? Thokmar smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You will be presented with a choice. A choice that will reveal who you really are. I think you will find it most interesting. As Jake was led back to his quarters, he could not shake the feeling that General Thokmar had something planned. The first 2 trials had been difficult, but fair. Jake had the distinct impression that the 3rd trial would be something else entirely. That night, as he lay in his bed, Jake thought about everything that had happened. He had proven he could fight smart and think differently. But what would the trial of honor demand of him? And what would General Thokmar do to make sure he failed? Jake fell asleep with these questions weighing on his mind, knowing that tomorrow would bring the greatest challenge yet. Jake woke up to the sound of alarms blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in his quarters, and he could hear the pounding of feet in the corridors outside. Something was very wrong. The door to his room opened, and 2 guards rushed in. "Come with us immediately," one of them said. "Commander Zareth requires your presence." They escorted Jake through corridors filled with running Kethvari soldiers. Everyone looked tense and worried. Jake tried to ask what was happening, but the guards would not answer his questions. They brought him to the bridge of the ship, where Zareth stood looking at a large viewing screen. The screen showed what appeared to be a battle in space. Explosions lit up the darkness as ships fired at each other. "What's going on?" Jake asked. Zareth turned to face him. Her expression was grim. "Your people are under attack. General Thokmar has launched a surprise assault on your ship, the Horizon." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "What? Why?" He claims it is part of your trial of honor. He says you must choose between saving your crew and completing the marriage ceremony. On the screen, Jake could see his ship trying to defend itself against three much larger Kethvari vessels. The Horizon was fast and maneuverable, but it was clearly outgunned. "This isn't a trial," Jake said angrily. "This is murder." "I agree," Zareth replied. "But Thokmar has convinced the council that this is a legitimate test of your character. He says a true warrior would choose to save his comrades over his personal interests." Jake watched as one of the attacking ships scored a direct hit on the Horizon. The human ship's shields flared and weakened. "How many people are on my ship?" "According to our intelligence, 47 crew members." 47 people who were going to die because of Jake's decision to accept Zareth's marriage. Proposal. He felt sick. "I have to go help them," Jake said. "If you leave now, the marriage is void. You will be considered an enemy of the Empire again. Thokmar will have you executed. I can't let my crew die." "There might be another way," Zareth said quietly. "What do you mean?" "Thokmar has exceeded his authority. He was ordered to conduct a trial, not to start a war with your people. If we can prove he is acting without proper authorization, we can stop this." "How?" "The attack orders would have to come from the High Command. If we can show that Thokmar issued these orders on his own, we can charge him with treason." Jake looked back at the screen. The Horizon was still fighting, but it would not last much longer against 3 warships. "Do we have time for that? We have to make time." Zareth H. turned to her communications officer. "Get me a direct link to High Command. Priority 1 authorization." "Commander, General Thokmar has ordered all communications to be routed through his command ship. Then we override his orders." "Use my personal codes?" The communications officer hesitated. "Commander, that would be considered mutiny." "Do it." The officer worked at his console for several minutes. Finally, he looked up. "I have High Command on the line, Commander." "Put them through," a voice filled the bridge. "This is Admiral Corex of High Command." "Commander Zareth, you are violating communications protocol." "Admiral, I need to verify the authorization for General Thokmar's attack on the human vessel." "What attack? We have issued no such authorization." Jake felt a surge of hope. Zareth's plan might actually work. "Admiral, General Thokmar is currently engaging a human diplomatic vessel with 3 warships. He claims this is part of an authorized trial." There was a long pause. "Commander Zareth, you will order General Thokmar to cease his attack immediately. He has no authority to engage human vessels." "Yes, Admiral." Zareth H. turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to Thokmar's ship." "Channel open, Commander." "General Thokmar, this is Commander Zareth H. You are ordered to cease your attack on the human vessel immediately." Thokmar's voice came through the speakers, distorted by static. "I am conducting a legitimate trial, Commander. You have no authority to interfere. I have direct authorization from Admiral Corex of High Command. You are to stand down immediately. High Command does not understand the situation here. The human must be tested properly. The human has already passed 2 trials. The 3rd trial does not require the death of innocent people." "Innocent?" "These are enemies of the Empire." Jake stepped forward. "General Thokmar, this is Jake Morrison. If you want to test my honor, then test me directly. Don't hide behind attacks on unarmed diplomatic vessels. You dare to question my methods, human? I'm questioning your courage. If you want to prove I'm unworthy, face me yourself. Don't use my crew as weapons against me." There was silence on the channel for a moment. Then Thokmar spoke again, his voice full of rage. "You think you can manipulate me with your human tricks? I think you're afraid to face the truth. You're afraid that maybe humans aren't as weak as you thought. You're afraid that maybe your way of doing things isn't the only way. I will show you weakness, human. I challenge you to single combat, here and now." "General," Zareth interrupted, "that is not part of the trial procedures. The trial procedures have been inadequate. This human needs to face a real test." Jake looked at Zareth. She shook her head slightly, warning him not to accept. "I accept your challenge," Jake said. Jake, no, Zareth said. Thokmar is one of our greatest warriors. He has killed hundreds of enemies in single combat. Then I guess I'll have to be number 401 to try. On the viewing screen, the attacking ships stopped firing. Jake could see that the horizon was badly damaged but still intact. The combat will take place on the docking bay of my ship, Thokmar announced. The human will come alone. I'll need transportation, Jake said. You'll take my personal shuttle, Zareth replied. And Jake... Thokmar fights without honor. He will try to kill you even after you yield. Be ready for anything. Jake nodded. He understood that this was about more than just his personal trial now. This was about the future relationship between humans and Kethvari. If Thokmar won, it would prove to many Kethvari that humans were weak and not worth respecting. If Jake won, it might open the door to real cooperation between their species. 20 minutes later, Jake stood in the docking bay of Thokmar's ship. The general was waiting for him, wearing full battle armor and carrying weapons that looked like they could cut through steel. So the little human comes to face his death, Thokmar said. I come to face a bully who attacks innocent people too. Prove his strength, Jake replied. Your crew will die anyway, human. After I kill you, I will finish destroying your ship. Then I will recommend that our fleet attack your homeworld. That's not going to happen. You think you can stop me? You think your pathetic human tricks will work against a true warrior? Jake looked around the docking bay. There were dozens of Kethvari soldiers watching from the upper levels. He also noticed something else. There were security cameras recording. Everything. I think you've already lost, Jake said. And you don't even know it yet. What are you talking about? You just confessed to planning an unauthorized attack on a diplomatic vessel. You just admitted that you intend to kill prisoners and attack civilian targets. All of that is being recorded and transmitted back to High Command. Thokmar's eyes widened as he realized what Jake was saying. You think that will save you? I think that will save both our peoples from a war that benefits no one. There will be no peace between our species. We are conquerors. We take what we want. And that's exactly why your people are dying out. You can conquer worlds, but you can't create anything new. You can destroy civilizations, but you can't build them. How long do you think that can last? Thokmar roared in anger and charged. But this time, Jake was ready for something different. As the general approached, Jake did not dodge or try to fight. Instead, he dropped his weapons and raised his hands. I surrender, Jake said loudly. Thok single quotes. Mar stopped, confused. What? I surrender. To the authority of the Kethvari Empire. I submit to the judgment of High Command. The watching soldiers murmured among themselves. By Kethvari law, Thokmar could not kill an enemy who had surrendered. You cannot surrender. This is single combat. This is murder, Jake replied, and I will not be part of it. Fight me, coward. No, I choose to trust in Kethvari justice instead of Kethvari violence. Thokmar raised his weapon, clearly intending to kill Jake despite the surrender. But before he could strike, the docking bay filled with armed guards. General Thokmar, called a voice from the entrance. You are under arrest for violation of High Command orders and conduct unbecoming an officer. Jake looked up to see Admiral Corex himself entering the docking bay, followed by a squad of elite guards. This human insulted the honor of the Empire, Thokmar protested. This human showed more honor than you have, the Admiral replied. He chose law over violence, justice over revenge. Those are the qualities we should value in our allies. As the guards took Thokmar away, Admiral Corex approached Jake. Captain Morrison, please accept the apologies of the Kethvari Empire. General Thokmar's actions were unauthorized and dishonorable. Thank you, Admiral. What happens now? Now, you complete your final trial. You have already passed the trial of honor by choosing to trust our justice system instead of resorting to violence. The marriage between you and Commander Zareth H. is. The marriage ceremony took place 1 week later in the Great Hall of the Kethvari capital ship. Jake had never seen anything like it. The room was enormous, with high ceilings decorated with silver and gold. Hundreds of Kethvari filled the space. along with the crew of the Horizon who had been invited as honored guests. Jake stood at the front of the hall, wearing ceremonial robes that had been specially made for him. They were a mixture of human and Kethvari designs, symbolizing the joining of two different cultures. Beside him, Zareth looked magnificent in her own ceremonial armor, polished until it gleamed like starlight. Admiral Korax performed the ceremony. He spoke in both English and the Kethvari language, making sure everyone could understand the importance of what was happening. "Today we witness not just the marriage of two individuals," the Admiral said, "but the beginning of a new relationship between our peoples. Jake Morrison and Commander Zareth have shown us that strength comes in many forms. They have proven that different does not mean inferior." Jake looked out at the crowd. He could see his crew members from the Horizon, still wearing bandages from the recent battle, but smiling broadly. He could also see many Kethvari who had initially opposed the marriage but now seemed genuinely interested in what it might mean for their future. The ceremony included traditions from both cultures. Jake and Zareth exchanged rings, a human custom. They also performed the Kethvari ritual of sharing blood, each making a small cut on their palm and pressing their hands together. It was symbolic of becoming one family. "Do you, Jake Morrison, accept Zareth as your equal partner in all things? Do you promise to stand beside her in times of peace and war, to share her burdens and her victories?" "I do," Jake said clearly. "Do you, Commander Zareth, accept Jake Morrison as your equal partner in all things? Do you promise to stand beside him in times of peace and war, to share his burdens and his victories?" "I do," Zareth replied. "Then by the authority of the Kethvari Empire and in the presence of these witnesses, I declare you married. May your union bring prosperity to both your peoples." The crowd erupted in cheers. Even some of the Kethvari who had seemed doubtful earlier were applauding. Jake felt a sense of relief and hope that he had not experienced since this whole adventure began. Later at the reception, Jake found himself surrounded by curious Kethvari asking questions about human culture. They wanted to know about Earth, about human technology, about how humans solved problems without always resorting to violence. "Your people build cities that reach into the sky, but you do not conquer other worlds to do it," one young Kethvari said. "How is this possible?" "We learned to work together," Jake explained. "Instead of fighting each other for resources, we found ways to share them. Instead of taking what we needed from others, we learned to create what we needed ourselves." "But how do you maintain order without conquest? How do you prevent the weak from being destroyed by the strong?" Jake thought about how to explain this in terms the Kethvari would understand. "We made laws that protect everyone, not just the strongest. We created systems where intelligence and creativity are valued as much as physical strength. We found that when everyone feels safe and valued, everyone works harder to make society better." An older Kethvari warrior spoke up. "This sounds like weakness to me. If there is no competition, no struggle, how do people improve themselves?" "There is still competition," Jake replied. "But we compete to build better things, to solve harder problems, to create more beautiful art. We compete to make life better, not to destroy our enemies." The warrior considered this. "And this makes you stronger?" "It makes us different. Whether that makes us stronger depends on how you define strength." Zareth joined the conversation. "I have been thinking about this question for a long time. Perhaps true strength is not the ability to destroy your enemies, but the ability to turn enemies into allies. Like what you have done with the human." Another Kethvari observed. "Like what we have done together," Zareth corrected. "This marriage works because we both chose it. Neither of us conquered the other." Over the following months, Jake and Zareth worked together to establish the first joint human Kethvari colony. They chose a planet called New Harmony, located at the border between human and Kethvari space. The planet had good resources but had never been colonized because it was too far from both civilizations to defend effectively. The colony became a testing ground for cooperation between the two species. Humans brought their knowledge of agriculture, medicine, and technology. Kethvari contributed their skills in construction, defense, and resource extraction. Together they built something neither species could have created alone. Jake found that working with the HFY was challenging but rewarding. They approached problems differently than humans did, often with more direct and practical solutions. But they also appreciated human creativity and flexibility when their own methods did not work. "Your people think in circles," Zareth told him one day as they watched human and HFY workers building the colony's first school together. "You consider many possibilities before choosing one. My people think in straight lines. We choose one path and follow it completely. And together we can think in spirals. We can choose a path but change direction when we find a better way." The success of New Harmony attracted attention from across the galaxy. Other species began to take notice of what humans and HFY could accomplish when they worked together instead of fighting. Some of these species sent ambassadors to learn more about the alliance. Jake found himself in the unexpected role of diplomat, helping to negotiate agreements between the HFY and species that had previously been their enemies. His unique position as both a human and a member of HFY society gave him insights that pure diplomats from either species lacked. "The Zephyrians are willing to consider a peace treaty," Jake told Zareth after a long day of negotiations. "But they want guarantees that the HFY will not attack their outer colonies." "What kind of guarantees?" "They want joint patrol ships. Mixed crews of Zephyrians and HFY working together to keep the peace." Zareth considered this. "My people will resist the idea of serving under alien commanders." "Then maybe no one serves under anyone. Maybe the crews work as equals like we do. You think that would work?" "I think it's worth trying. The alternative is another war that benefits no one." 6 months later, the first joint HFY Zephyrian patrol ship launched from New Harmony. The crew was small, only 12 beings total, but it represented something unprecedented in galactic history. Former enemies working together to maintain peace. Jake and Zareth stood on the observation deck of the colony's central hub, watching the ship disappear into hyperspace. In Zareth's arms was their first child, a daughter they had named Hope. The baby had characteristics from both parents, human-like features but with the faint shimmer of scales along her arms. "Do you think she will grow up in a peaceful galaxy?" Zareth asked. "I think she'll grow up in a galaxy where peace is possible," Jake replied. "Whether it happens depends on the choices her generation makes." "And what choices do you think they will make?" Jake looked down at his daughter, who was reaching up to touch his face with tiny fingers. "I think they'll make better choices than we did. They'll grow up seeing cooperation as normal instead of strange. They'll see differences as advantages instead of threats." "You sound very confident." "I am confident. Not because I think the future will be easy, but because I think it will be full of people like her. People who don't see boundaries between species as permanent barriers." Hope gurgled and grabbed Jake's finger with surprising strength. In that moment, Jake realized something important. When he first told Zareth that she was different, he had meant it as an observation. Now he understood it was a prediction. She was different because she could see a future that most HFY could not imagine. And together they were creating that future. As they watched more ships launch from New Harmony, carrying diplomats and traders and explorers to all corners of the galaxy, Jake reflected on how much had changed. His mission had been to prevent a war. Instead, he had helped start a revolution. "What are you thinking about?" Zareth asked. "I'm thinking about how you answered my proposal," Jake said with a smile. "You mean how I proposed to you?" "Right. When I said you were different, you said we should marry. At the time, I thought you were crazy. And now?" "Now I think you were brilliant. You saw something I couldn't see." "What did I see?" "You saw that being different wasn't something to be afraid of. You saw that it was something to celebrate." Hope made a small sound as if she agreed. Jake and Zareth laughed together, the sound echoing through the observation deck and out into the stars, where their new alliance was already changing the galaxy forever. In the distance, another ship was approaching New Harmony. This one carried a delegation from the Andromedans, a species that had never had contact with either humans or HFY before. Soon, Jake and Zareth would be welcoming new friends to their growing community. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities. And that, Jake thought, was exactly how it should be.